Hey guys, Josiah here, easycaters.com. I wanted to go over the last couple of days' trades. I wasn't able to do a video yesterday, so I thought I'd go over yesterday's trading and then go through today's as well, since the market is just about to close here. And I'm done for the day. So this is yesterday's open, and yesterday ended up being pretty much a range-bound day in MU. Everything was inside the range of the prior day, pretty much, and so trend systems obviously are not that great in a range-bound type of environment. The problem for all traders is trying to figure out when a day is going to be a range-bound day versus when a day is going to be a trend day. And I think this system actually does have something to some value to add in that direction as well, where your volume signals and your commitment can give you some indication as to whether or not, there's the setup that you're currently trading is a setup that actually has some context in the direction that you're trading it in, or if it's just a one-off entry signal that has no real context to back it up. And so that can help in weeding out some garbage entries in a range-bound day where you have a tendency to get whipsawed back and forth in and out of trades and so forth. So here was the open, no setups yet. We had this signal short. We had a gap down, large volume up, bottoming tail, and just kind of stuck in a range here. We had a first signal here with a topping tail against the MA, but this is kind of a larger volume candle. We had a smaller volume candle come in here, and then a high volume candle trigger in short. And then that one was immediately stopped out and went long. This one, so we had a spike up to close the gap and a small pullback to the MA, and this would be a valid signal short, and it barely triggers in, and that one would be a stop out too if you had taken that. We have this one tiny pullback to the MA here, which would have been a good signal for a long. And if you took this, this would have been essentially, it looks like a 2R. Yeah, that should have gone 2Rs. So that would be a 2R win. And then, let's see, then we're up here at this high of the range, and we have some high commitment orders come in kind of near the top. Usually those types of situations remind me of something like this over here. If you see, the highs and lows of pivots tend to happen on extremely high commitment. And so when I see those types of things come in at after a big move has happened, I usually I'm a little cautious. I want to have a good some time pass before I am willing to trade in that direction again. And it does turn out. Let's see here. See if we have any good signals. So there was a possible, and see we still had some commitment come in here, and this is pretty typical of a range-bound day. At this point where we've made a high, kind of come back down to the bottom of this range, top of the range, low of the range, it's looking like a range-bound day at this point. But you never know. So this would have been a signal short potentially here. And it looks like it would have been a trail break even. It would have gone 1R in your direction, and at that point you would trail to break even, and then it would have trailed you out there. No signal there. Let me expand this chart a little bit so you can see a little better. No real signals through here. We did break out of this range, came back down to test the low of this wider area. Some commitment came in here at the very low of this range. So to me, this is looking like, you know, we've got a high here, a low here, high here, low here, etc. So it's just you know, it's like these are the boundaries. But we have a high commitment, or at least decent commitment spike back up to the MA. Then we're pulling back in with bottoming tails. This could be a long over the high of this candle, this red candle. And that one looks like it goes so this one, it looks like it went about 1.5 hours, so you definitely would have trailed to break even at that one. And then that one would have trailed you out. Potential setup there. We're getting into the time of day where volume is drying up, right around the lunch hour. This one didn't quite touch the MA, so that wouldn't have been a valid entry. This is a potential entry short here. However, it's not really that great of a risk to reward to this low. So, I mean, this could have possibly been taken, but there's, like I was mentioning earlier, there's just not a lot of context for either direction at this point. So it's kind of like you know, you can just take one-off setups that, you know, entry signals that happen, but you know, the edge is not really there. So a lot of times you just have to be patient and wait for a high context, high commitment bar to show you which direction to trade in, and then find your first low commitment pullback in that direction. So that's the approach I tend to take with this. So here I would see this as stopping volume most likely, as marking the low of this move. May or may not happen, but that's what it looks like. And it looks like it does rocket off from there. So, and this would have been a valid pullback as an early entry into this potential uptrend if you bought the high of this candle as it broke above through here. And that one would have worked really well for probably 4 or 5 hours there. We had a potential short here. It's not the greatest, but because we had kind of this high volume, high commitment move up here, and some resistance come in, I could potentially see this as continuing back to the low of the range again, just because, again, we're kind of in a rangy type of environment. You can see we're not really going anywhere. We're just zigzagging back and forth. So this could be a short under the low of this green. And it looks like that one got to 1. That one did get to 2 R's. If you notice, sometimes one signal that I look for is how many lighter colored green candles there are versus the lighter colored red candles. So indicating who's committed the most to this move. So you can see here there's green coming in all these, there's commitment coming in all the green candles, and only occasionally there's a red that has commitment in it. So it's looking like the volume is kind of drying up on the red side and coming in on the green side. And that's just kind of a general sentiment to look for. And you can see high commitment there. And so we're back above the MA. I think at this point, since we tested this low again as support, if we had a light volume pullback to the MA here, I would buy that over the red. I don't like that this closed on its low. That's not the ideal type of entry bar, but it may work. So that one triggered in, nope, and then it immediately stopped. So yeah, that's one of the reasons this actually indicates some strength to the downside, even though it's not a high commitment bar or anything. It's closing exactly on its low. I'd much prefer to see a candle more like the previous one here, light volume, and the close is near the MA instead of way below the MA. So that's one thing to look for as well. No signals through here. I mean, this might have been a signal. It's kind of a wide candle for an entry, but depending on what you're doing, you could have taken that. And then we're down into the close here. That one would have been probably a trail to break even at 1 hour. So all in all, yesterday was kind of just a so-so day, and I'm kind of glad I missed it. I was out doing some manual labor at one of my rental houses, and so I missed all the exciting range-bound action of yesterday. Definitely more challenging than the average day, though. That it was probably would have ended up being a red day overall, just because there's so many whipsaws in the morning here. Today was a little better. So this is today's open, and let's see. So this would have been the first signal to go long. Because all this volume came in at the top, though, it's kind of not that great of a signal. And I would probably, I think it's valid though, so I would probably go ahead and take it if it triggered. And then it didn't trigger that time. We had another bottoming tail, light volume, low commitment candle come in here. So buying over the high of this looks a little more attractive than this one did. And so actually I did buy this one, and I started seeing how we had commitment come into the upside, then immediately commitment came into the downside. So it was just like nobody really knew what was going on. It's just kind of sideways motion. Everybody's just placing a bunch of orders in here, and it's not going anywhere. I did get to my, I think, second target, or no, I got to my first target, and then trailed to half risk, something like that. And I'm trying to remember how I traded this. Anyway, I ended up losing something like half an R on this trade because it just zigzagged around. And so that was my first trade of the morning. And then, but okay, so I stopped out right here as it was coming back down to test this entry area. So I had trailed to break even, and it stopped me out, and then I immediately saw that it was doing this light volume retrace, which we had this red context candle and a low commitment retrace back into the MA. And so I took it on a short below this green candle, and it wasn't super smooth, but it did go to 2 R's, and so I was able to net 1.5 R's for the day. So I lost a half an R on this first trade and made 2 R's on the second trade. And that one worked really well. We had no entry there. At that point, I kind of took a break and went and did some other stuff for the day. And so I think I missed a couple of signals that happened during the later morning. Nothing really in here because we don't really have much of a context for either direction here. This is just kind of crisscrossing the MA. The MA is still sloping downward, but there's no short signal. Possibly a long signal here, but again, not that great because we don't really have a huge context for that direction. And it looks like it continues short. And yeah, then we had this again, a lot of the last 2 days has been just kind of this unclear commitment. Like there's commitment in both directions, so that's pretty typical of a range-bound day. So when it's confusing like this, sometimes it's best to just step aside, I think, and wait for a better, clear context to appear. But so again, we have this kind of like strong commitment up bar, strong commitment down bar. Nothing really there. Yeah. So now we start getting some real context here. We're breaking back out. Unfortunately, I don't think this one actually gave any type of entry here. Just kind of shot up. No light volume pullbacks. We have a higher commitment red candle, which kind of is not what I would look for a buy. You could buy this as an entry, but with this top heavy volume up here, I'm not as interested in that. This was a valid short signal. This green short under the low. It looks like that one would have gone 2 R's, and then that would have immediately reversed down here, and there was no entry to get into this move here. This just kind of came out of nowhere and happened. This was a late entry in the move, and it would have gone 2 R's. And then you see here as this pullback is coming back into the MA, this is all on high commitment. So this is not the kind of pullback I want to buy. This has some drying up commitment as it comes back to the MA, and it has a nice bottoming tail here at the MA. So this is kind of more of an ideal pullback. I don't like having this top heavy volume here, but it does dry up. The volume does dry up on this pullback, so that's good. This is not the kind of pullback that you want to buy. And so you can see if you had bought that, that would have been a stop out. Kind of just turned into a range here. Here was a signal to go long. We had some bottoming volume come in here, and so this could potentially have been taken as a long with this low commitment. You can see down here this is super low commitment on this bar. So this, I could possibly have seen this as a long, since this kind of bottoming volume came in down here. It looks like that would not have worked out very well. Looks like that would have just been a stop out. And I don't think there was really any other signal for the afternoon. So this could have been a short. Let's see. We have resistance here. Yeah, this could be a short under the low of this candle, these topping tails. And that one would have gone 1 R, so it would have trailed you out. So it's just kind of a whipsaw day, nothing really exciting to report. I happened to grab one of the better ones for the day in the morning and skipped out on some of this range-bound action later in the morning. this is a valid signal, but it's a high commitment bar, so that's not something that I would have bought. And there was no real entry all through this late afternoon run up that happened here. This would have been a good signal if it had touched the MA, and same thing with this one, but they just weren't deep enough pullbacks for me to get in on this. I was kind of watching as it was doing this, but there was just no valid signal for me to get in on, so I just left it and let it go. Then we have this high commitment sell off into the close, and so then we're just resting on the high of this range that we had formed earlier. So I think at this point we've broken out, whoops, we've kind of broken above yesterday's high and come back down to test that as support. We stopped almost exactly at the prior day's high, and so probably tomorrow we're going to be trying to look at the potential of breaking out and moving up. I noticed that volatility has been shrinking the last several days, so it's kind of like the spring is getting coiled and ready to maybe move up in the next day or two here. So that's what I'm going to be looking for tomorrow, is maybe a trend day upward as we break out of this kind of large double bottom pattern down here. Anyway, so nothing too exciting the last couple of days. Definitely not yesterday. Today had a couple of good trades, and hopefully that will help going back over some of these, and I think it helps me to look back over the day and review some of these potential trades that could have been taken and see the ones that didn't work and see potential reasons why they didn't work and so forth, to help keep me out of losing trades in the future. So anyway, I hope you guys find this helpful. If you do, please feel free to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks.